A story arc is not about staying still. It is about the movement. Those rises and falls are what carry the story forward. That movement, mapped from beginning to end, is what we call a story arc. Now, each story arc has those specific pinpoints we just spoke of, those 4 pinpoints. However, where and how they fall is particular to that story. So as you write your story arc, or maybe map one of your favorite stories, their arc, their key points, might not line up as the same ones right next to theirs. They should all have the same 4 pinpoints, yes, but where they might lie or how they might look might not be exactly the same to its neighbors. Now, this moment of disruption within that arc, let's talk about that. This is often called the call to adventure. We've talked about it. It doesn't always look heroic. It isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just a quiet question that lingers. Sometimes it's a loss. Sometimes it's an opportunity that refuses to be ignored. This call to adventure is simply the moment when staying the same is no longer possible for this character or characters. And this is where the story really begins to move, and where this character or group must decide whether to step forward or remain unchanged, and face the consequences of either decision. So when you read a story or watch a movie or play a game, you're not just being entertained, you are connecting. You are watching the same cycle that governs seeds, seasons, water, and time. You are watching life told back to you in story form. That is the science of story. The cycle we've been living inside, by now, you may have started to notice. We didn't just study a root, grow, harvest rhythm, we've been living in it. We begin in a roots month, a history month, asking questions, tracing origins, planning, understanding our historical roots. Now we are in the growth part, the grow month, where tension appears, meaning we start to grow in that knowledge with patterns emerging and things beginning to change. And next month, we'll move into harvest, where meaning forms, fruit appears, and creation happens, aka your stories. This isn't an accident. We are fashioned in the same rhythm we are studying. Now, for the finale of this lesson, we're going to talk about the diagram for this month, that root, grow, harvest rhythm. This month, we're going to use one diagram to help us see what's really happening inside stories. At first glance, it looks simple, which it is. It's a cycle, but it does explain more than you might expect. It's an arch form resembling the same way a wave moves. On the outside, you'll see a large circular curving motion made of 3 parts. The first is root. Root is where everything begins. Remember that normal world part? Yeah, that lives here. It represents origin, need, question, and seed. In stories, this is the why. It's the longing beneath the surface. Nothing meaningful begins without roots. Next comes grow. This is where that tension appears, where the development happens, where challenge, pressure, and change take place. This is where the story moves, and where our characters or group are shaped, where life refuses to stay still. Then we reach the harvest. Harvest is outcome, meaning, renewal, fruition. It's not just an ending, it's what all the growth is for. In stories, this is the understanding that forms, the aha moment. But there's something important inside of this cycle, something that doesn't happen only once. Inside the larger circle is a smaller ongoing loop. This is tinned. Like all the bubbles that act as working tendons to a wave's moving parts, tending represents attention, to observe, to respond, to adjust, to care, to remain aware. Growth doesn't happen automatically. In fact, it requires presence and patience. In science, nothing develops without observation and response. In story, nothing deepens without attention. In life, nothing meaningful grows without care. Tending can happen at any point, between root and grow, between grow and harvest, or again and again along the way. Very similar to our story arcs that have the same pinpoints, but in their own rhythms. This diagram explains why story works, because it mirrors how creation itself works. Plants grow this way, ecosystems function this way, human beings mature this way, faith deepens this way, and stories move this way. Root, grow, harvest. with tending whenever it's needed. So, that quiet truth that we've been going towards underneath everything, once you see this rhythm, you start seeing story everywhere. In the way that you dress, you speak, the way you walk through the world, and how you express yourself, and how your life unfolds over time. Story isn't just something we read or watch, it's something we live. God's fingerprints are everywhere, woven into creation, into story, and into you. Once you see the cycle, you can't unsee it. So what the diagram should look like, that wave and arch form. Its overall shape, a curving wave or arch, it starts low with the root, rises upward in its growth, and it reaches the highest point, that climax and pinnacle. Then it falls gently into harvest and curves back upward again to begin the next cycle. Think low, rise, peak, fall, rise again. Not a loop that goes nowhere, a wave that keeps moving forward. As for labeling the wave's parts, here's a few details to add. At the start of the curve, the root, positioned at the lowest point, labeled root, seed, need, question, beginning. This is the bare soil, nothing flashy, but everything starts here. Then you hit the rising curve, the grow part. This is the upward slope of the wave. You can label it growth, tension, change, challenge, rising action. This is where pressure builds, where things stretch, where effort and struggle live. Then the top of the arch, the pinnacle, the climax. This is the highest point of the wave, labeled climax, turning point, peak, moment of decision. This is where everything is tested. Nothing stays the same after this point. And finally, that downward curve, the harvest, the falling side of the wave, labeled harvest, outcome, meaning, renewal, resolution. This is where the fruit appears, where understanding forms, where something has been produced, our aha moment. What happens after harvest is where it becomes really powerful. At the end of the harvest, the fruit doesn't disappear, it falls. Seeds return to the soil, leaves decay, nutrients are released. The ground is no longer empty, it is richer than before. So when the next wave begins, when the next root forms, it doesn't start from nothing. It starts from everything that came before. When a plant finishes its season, the story doesn't end. The fruit falls, the leaves return to the ground, and what looks like an ending becomes nourishment. The soil is changed by what grew there before. It's richer, deeper, more ready than it was at the start. So when the next seed is planted, it doesn't begin from nothing. It begins from everything that came before it. Stories work the same way. Every rise, every fall, every harvest leaves something behind. Nothing is wasted. Each new beginning is fed by the meaning of the last one, and each cycle grows stronger, deeper, and more alive than the one before. So the meaning of our repeating wave with each cycle, beginning low, rising, falling, and rising again, and every time it rises, it has more depth, more nutrients, more understanding, is because later stories are deeper, later growth is stronger, later creations carry more meaning. The cycle repeats, but it never resets to zero. What this teaches all of us instantly is that story is movement. Growth includes both rising and falling. Harvest feeds the next beginning. Nothing meaningful is wasted, and creation is designed for ongoing growth. Stories don't move in straight lines. They rise, they fall, and they rise again, each time carrying more meaning than before. Once you understand this cycle, story stops being something you study and starts being something you notice in nature, in people, in your own life. Rooting, growing, harvesting, with meaning carried forward every time. This is how creation moves. This is why story works. These patterns weren't invented. They were designed, woven into creation, woven into us, woven into every story that feels true. That is the science of story, and it's been here all along. This week, we've learned how story moves. Next, we'll begin to notice it everywhere and learn how to tend it with care, because once you understand the cycle, you're ready to use it, and that's where this journey is headed. So for today's primary activity, we have map the living wave. Have you ever noticed how waves work at the ocean? One wave comes in small, easy to stand in, and then the next one is suddenly bigger, stronger, almost knocking you off your feet. Nothing changed about the ocean. What changed was the energy building underneath. Each wave carries something before it, and sometimes that makes the next one stronger. Each rise, each fall, each harvest feeds the next beginning, and the movement keeps growing. So next time you're at the beach, watch the waves of the ocean. Watch them as they rise, they crest, and they fall over and over again. But notice the ocean isn't stopping and starting each time. The energy keeps moving forward. Each wave is shaped by the one before it, by the pull of the tide, the wind, and the water beneath. Even when a wave falls, nothing is lost. The motion continues. That's how the story cycle works. Stories rising, falling, and rising again, carrying energy, meaning, and growth forward every time. But for now, we're going to map it out for our activity. We're just going to make a visual diagram for this month. We've been talking about how stories move like waves. Now you're going to build that wave, not simply by drawing it, but by actually feeling it. You'll use torn paper because waves aren't perfect, smooth lines. They're layered. They overlap. They build on what came before it. Just like stories, just like life.